This is part 5 of our series, The Truth About Anxious Attachment, What You Don't See. In part 1, we talked about how anxious men and women respond differently after a breakup. And in part 2, we focused on anxious women, how their panic often gets misread as drama. And in part 3, we explored anxious men and how their emotional honesty gets unfairly judged. And this morning, in part 4, we looked at what happens when two anxious people fall in love and how that connection can be healing or potentially overwhelming. And now in part 5, we need to talk about something harder to look at. What happens when anxious panic starts to look like abuse? Sometimes what an anxious person is doing feels like love to them because they're trying, they're reaching, they're showing up with everything they've got. But to the person on the receiving end, it can feel like being smothered or manipulated or emotionally cornered. That's the heartbreak of the anxious spiral, because anxious people don't mean to hurt anyone. They're just terrified and they don't know what to do with the panic. When someone pulls away, the anxious system interprets it as abandonment and goes immediately into protest mode. That protest might look like nonstop texting, showing up unannounced, refusing to end a conversation, pleading, accusing, demanding closure. To the anxious person, it feels like survival. To the other person, it feels like emotional overwhelm or even emotional control. And when that panic turns into fight mode, that anxious person might raise their voice. They might lash out. They might say things they don't mean because their nervous system is hijacked. They don't see it as aggression. They see it as desperation, but the impact can still be damaging. This is how anxious protest can get misunderstood as abuse, and sometimes how it starts becoming abuse even when the intention was never cruelty. This isn't about toxic intent. It's about terror that never learned how to regulate. But it still matters, because even if you didn't mean to hurt them, if you're not aware of what your panic looks like, you could still be doing damage. If this made you pause, save it, not to shame yourself, but to understand yourself better. In part 6, we're closing the series by zooming out. Same wound, different face, how anxious attachment gets misjudged, mislabeled, and misunderstood, and what real healing actually looks like. Don't miss it.